لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده وحبيبه ورسوله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أما بعد, my dear brothers, respected sisters in Islam, I want to begin with the ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hashr, and just to give you a brief background of this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah is addressing the believers. He says, those who believe, those who have iman, the mu'mineen. And this isn't a warning, rather it's a word of advice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and wants the best for those who believe in Him, for those who respect Him, and those who worship Him. And doesn't want, He wants to advise them towards success and wants them to be amongst the muflihun, the successful, those who have their books in their right hands, those who enter into the gates of Jannah, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that for us. It's not as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to fail and He wants us to really, to exert 100,000% of our energy and no, it's not in that sense. It's in the same way. Take the example of a parent, right? A parent who has children. That child respects their parents. They treat their parents well, and that parent is not going to make sure this child fails, and make sure that he wants the best for his child. And he wants his child to be successful in this world. And no way does this correlate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have children, but you get the kind of, you get the sense of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this sense, He is saying that He wants us to be successful. He's advising us towards success. He is advising us to be closer to Him in status. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe. This is Surah Al-Hashr again, the 27th ayah. It says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, ittaqullah, have the taqwa of Allah, وَلْتَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. And every soul look at what he has prepared for tomorrow. Now let's just go on to the first part of this ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who believe, ittaqullah, have that taqwa of Allah. Have that taqwa of Allah. And what is taqwa, first of all? A lot of times it's not because it's somebody being lazy or lack of knowledge. Sometimes because taqwa is such a broad topic that that time will restrict you from thoroughly explaining it. It would take 2 or 3 khutbahs just to explain taqwa. But I will try to briefly try to summarize it and unpack it. So taqwa, a lot of times, is loosely translated as fear. You see in the books, in the Quran, the translation, sometimes you see fear Allah, have that fear of Allah. Now fear by itself has its own word in Arabic. It's khawf. Having that, and fear, if you think about fear, when people have fear, they have that fear of the dark or fear of spiders, or fear of these things that that they'll make them cower, and they'll make them get me away from that thing, get me as far away from that thing as possible, right? So it's not fear in that sense. Fear is part of taqwa, but it's not all of taqwa. One good example that I'll give of taqwa is I was just actually driving down 85, and on the side of the road, it was before the doorbell, the doorbell exit. There was a police officer right on the exit right there, and he was clocking, and I have a pretty heavy foot on the gas pedal, so I was going like 20, 30 over, and I saw him on the in my profile. I saw him standing there. I saw him sitting with his little radar gun, and he was clocking. And what's the first thing that happens when you see that? Your heart drops. So you immediately look at your speedometer. You look at him, back at your speedometer. Look at your rear view. Look at your speedometer. Look back at him. Is he pulling out? Is he coming out? Is he coming from me? Is he pulling me over? All these things come, and in the span of a few seconds, all these things are coming across your mind. All right, and there's a few outcomes that can come from it. He could pull you over. He can give you a ticket. You could be lucky. He can give you a warning, or he could just not even pull you over altogether. Right. So in this sense, why are you fearful? Why does your heart drop to your stomach in that time? Because you're making a mistake. You're speeding. Now I was going 20 over. Luckily, he didn't pull me over, but I was going 20 over the speed limit. He didn't pull me over, and at that time I got relief. I was optimistic because I was in the far left lane and I kind of sped down. I saw him early and I started to speed down early. I was optimistic in that sense. So we have fear, we have optimism, we have hope. It's sort of the same thing. And at the end we have happiness and we have that relief. All those words and all these adjectives come into play when you're talking about taqwa. Now one of the Salaf described it best. He said, one of the early predecessors, he said, taqwa and finding that highest sense of taqwa and that perfect balance of taqwa is finding yourself smack dab in the middle between fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment and hope for His mercy. So on one side you have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment, other side you have the hope for His and optimism for His mercy, for Jannah. Finding yourself in the middle of that is that perfect balance of taqwa. You don't want to be too optimistic, too hopeful for His mercy, and too saying, I can do whatever I want, I'm going to make it to Jannah. No, that's not the right mindset to have. And on the other side, being too fearful of His punishment, meaning, why should I do good deeds when I'm just going to be taken to Jannah? No, do that. So finding yourself in the middle between these two, between the optimism for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and for the fear of His punishment, right in the middle. So again, you're conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all aspects. And we're going to use the word consciousness just to save time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hashr, O you who believe, for those who walked in, He says, O you who believe, addressing us as believers, addressing us as mu'mineen, addressing us who has iman. He says, Ittaqullah, have that taqwa of Allah. Have that taqwa of Allah. Be fully conscious of Him in all aspects. Be fully conscious of His punishment, of His ability to punish you. Be fully conscious of His ability to give you that Jannah. Be fully conscious of His knowledge of everything. Be fully conscious of in all aspects of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And do your best to be fully conscious of Him. وَلْتَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. And every soul look at what they have prepared for tomorrow. Every soul look at what they have prepared for tomorrow. And this is kind of the topic where we're going to talk about today. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions tomorrow, He doesn't literally mean Saturday, He doesn't literally mean the weekend. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about one of the biggest and longest journeys that we're going to experience in our existence. Longest journey, the hardest obstacles, you name it. This is going to be the biggest day in our whole existence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to prepare for that day. That day of judgment when we will be in front of Allah with our good deeds on our right and our bad deeds on our left. Be prepared for that day. Now, it's easy to prepare for something that you know when it's going to be. It's easy to prepare for something that you have a trip coming up. You're going out overseas in a week or so. You have the little list. Some people do the list. I'm type B. I don't have any list. I just kind of night before I kind of wing it. But some people have that list and they check, okay, do I have my hygiene kit? Do I have all my clothes? Extra everything. Making sure that you're very well prepared for that trip. Now this, when you're preparing for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, there is no list that we can have. There is no physical way to prepare for the Day of Judgment, meaning there is no physical way to look at what you have prepared for the Day of Judgment, unless you have written down every single deed that you have done since you were valid, since you were able to understand. There is no way to be able to look at what you prepared. So how do we look at what we have prepared? How do we fully prepare for that day when we'll be in front of Allah? Is the question. And we'll try to kind of answer that. So, but to finish the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلْتَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. Every soul look at what he has prepared for. They have prepared for tomorrow. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. And again, he says, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. Again, he says, be fully conscious, be fully aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sort of in a sense, if you look at the structure of the ayah, he says, اتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. O you who believe, اتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. Have that taqwa of Allah. وَلْتَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. And again, wattaqullah. Every soul look at what they have prepared for tomorrow, and again have that taqwa of Allah. In a sense, he's sandwiching that advice of preparing for tomorrow by being fully conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in a sense, he is telling us, in a way, to prepare for tomorrow is to be fully conscious of him, and vice versa. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finishes the ayah by saying, Inna Allah khabirun bima ta'malun. For verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fully aware of what you do. So how do we prepare for something that we don't know when it's going to be? How do we prepare for something? How do we look at what we have prepared for something that we as Muslims, we believe that we never know when that day will come. We never know when that day of judgment will come. We never know if that day will come by us passing away, or will that day come by literally everything ceasing to exist. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing for today to be that day. I want to quote Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala an, one of the most influential figures in Islamic history, the second Khalifa in Islam. He said, when he was Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he was the leader of the believers, he said, Ayyuhan nas, O people, he was addressing the people around him, he said, Hasibu anfusakum qabla an tuhasibu. Take account of yourself before you are taken into account. Take account of yourself before you are in front of Allah. And again, you have that scale in front of you. It's a terrifying day, and it's something that all of us should be fully aware of, and how long of a journey it is, and how hard of an obstacle it is, and so on and so forth. Every soul look at what he has prepared for that day, and every soul take himself into account before that day comes when he is in front of Allah, and he will be taken into account. So, how do we take ourselves into account? How do we prepare for that day? How do we take ourselves into account before we are taken into account? It's a very hard thing to do, especially in today's day and age, where it's human nature that we surround ourselves with people who are friendly with it. We don't surround ourselves with people who are constantly critiquing us and constantly telling us, you need to do that, you need to pray, you need to read more Quran, you need to do this. We don't surround ourselves with people who do that. We consider them judgmental, we consider them harsh, and so on and so forth. We more so like to surround ourselves with people who are friendly towards us and joke around and have a good time around them, which is fair. So, keeping that in mind, we ourselves have to be our own harshest critics. We ourselves have to be our own biggest critics, because we ourselves know our habits. We ourselves know our good habits, our bad habits. We know our shortcomings. We know what we need to fix. We need to improve upon. All these things we know best. Even our parents don't know how much we have to fix and what we have to work on. So keeping that in mind, we have to constantly be in this state of being introspective, of taking ourselves into account and critiquing ourselves. When I say critiquing, critiquing comes with a harsh connotation. I don't mean in the sense of degrading yourself and constantly, bringing yourself down. No, in a sense, constructive criticism. Asking yourself, what can I improve upon? What am I doing right, first of all? If I'm doing something right, keep doing that thing and keep doing more of that thing. If I'm doing something wrong, fix that thing, get it out of your life, get it out of your habit tray, and just stop doing it. It's easier said than done, but we'll go into habits in the later part of the khutbah, inshallah. But being introspective is a habit that all Sahaba used to do. Most of the Sahaba used to be in the state of introspective, even though they were the Sahaba. They were the upper echelon of the mu'mineen. They were what we're supposed to look up to. They used to constantly be critiquing themselves to a point where it's overly harsh, you could say. You look at some of the quotes, and we'll mention just one. If you ask anybody who was the leader of the Sahaba, who was the top of the Sahaba, you would say Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiyallahu ta'ala an. And he was quoted once as saying, and on several occasions rather, this was the first one was in Hayat al-Sahaba, where he was walking into a garden and he saw a bird, and he was talking to the bird. He said, how lucky you are, how I wish I were you. You get to fly around, you get to not worry about anything and not worry about the judgment of Allah. This is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Some of these Sahaba were promised Jannah, and they would have this mindset of being constantly fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment, to the point where they don't even want to face it. All these are metaphorical. He was saying he was with his companions, and he was saying to a tree, how lucky is this tree? How lucky are the leaves of this tree? They get to just blow off the tree and not face the judgment of Allah. Same thing. All these are metaphorical, but you get the sense that they are very harsh on themselves, to a point where you will be kind of overly harsh in today's age. But this is something that is tough to do if you have an ego to yourself. If you have this egotistic side, and you have this, and how much the ego has grown in the past decade or so is kind of mind-boggling. You look at all today's leaders, all today's world leaders, all of them have this narcissistic side to themselves. All of them are, I have done no wrong, I can do no wrong, I'm not going to apologize for anything. They're not improving upon themselves, and they're not saying I need to improve this upon that. All of today's role models and our generation's role models, and the celebrities, the athletes of today, the Kanye West of the world and the Kobe Bryants, they all have this egotistic side to themselves. So this is something that is growing and something that is becoming more and more popular. And as long as we have this ego, as long as we have this narcissistic side to ourselves, we will never be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We will never be closer to preparing for that day where we were talking about preparing, looking at what you prepare for tomorrow. We will never be close to preparing for that day. So my advice to myself and to all of you is just look at yourselves and ask yourself, what can I improve upon? If you have, first of all, work on your ego. First of all, work on our egos, and then work on just being humble. And humbling yourself and telling yourself, I am something it's a work in progress, first of all, something that needs to constantly be improving, something that needs to constantly be developing these good habits and getting rid of bad habits. Inshallah, we'll go more into habits in the second part of the khutbah. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So in the first part of the khutbah, we talked about being introspective. We talked about looking at yourselves and then being your own biggest critics. And again, critics, not in the sense that you're constantly degrading yourself, but in the sense that you're building yourself up. Constructive criticism, you can say, being your own biggest critic in that sense. And we also talked about developing ourselves and constantly be in a state of improving and not be overly satisfied. One of the biggest tools that Shaitan uses against us is this mindset of over-satisfaction and over-contentment. And I say this because, over-satisfaction meaning I do this, I pray 5 times a day, I already pray 5 times a day, I pay my zakat, and I did my hajj, and I do all these things. Why should I do more? You're overly content in that sense that you feel like you don't need to do more. You feel like you're already close enough to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where you don't need to improve upon yourself. We need to constantly be in a state of improvement, constantly be in a state where we're developing ourselves, and constantly, it doesn't matter what age we are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينَ, and worship Allah until death comes. Until that certainty comes. Until death comes, keep on worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and keep on building upon yourself. There is no point in our lives where we have to say, okay, I'm done developing. I'm done developing my my characteristics, my habits, my good habits, and getting rid of my bad habits. There's no point in our lives where we should have that kind of a mindset. So how do we develop habits? How do we get rid of bad habits? I'll mention 10 ways, inshallah ta'ala, and I'll correlate them with some ayahs in the Quran and some hadith from Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But when we talk about habits, literally from the sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, all the things that he used to do, these were habits. The miswak, what he used to take. This is a habit of Rasul, and being constantly having the itar and perfuming himself, making sure that he's smelling good, making sure that he's bathed, and making sure that he's clean. These were just habits of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they were sunnah, so they are good deeds upon us as well. But you get the sense that habits are such an important thing in Islam that we as Muslims we get this reward for just doing the habits that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has created in his life. So how do we develop habits? How do we get rid of bad habits? And because this is something that we tend to struggle with, some habits that we're so connected with and we're so inclined towards. We've been doing these things for so long. How can we stop doing it? And I'm not just talking about smoking. I'm not just talking about things that we're addicted to. Rather, sometimes mentally addicted. So I'll mention 10 ways really quickly, inshallah, and we'll wrap up with that. Number 1, the first way is to acknowledge that we have something that we need to be fixing. To acknowledge something that we have this bad habit, I need to be fixing it. We have this thing that I need to fix, work on. Acknowledge it. First of all, this is something that again, it goes over a lot of our heads. We say, okay, acknowledge it. Of course I need to acknowledge it. But sometimes we have, again, going back to the ego, we have this side that we think, okay, I have nothing to improve upon. I have no major flaws. When in reality, we have all these minor flaws to ourselves that build up and make this major flaw. So acknowledge that we have this thing that needs to be fixed. Acknowledge that we have this bad habit that needs to be fixed. Or acknowledge, on the other side, acknowledge that I have this good habit that I need to work upon. Right? Such as praying, such as waking up on time, such as reading more Quran, and so on and so forth. So number 1 is acknowledging, and this goes back to all the 10-step programs and all the whatever habit developing programs there are. First and foremost is just acknowledging that there is something that we need to be fixing. Number 2 is picking a habit, and just one habit for 30 days. A lot of studies show, some of them show even less than 30 days. I've seen studies that show 3 weeks. Some go as far as to say 60 days, but in the median, the middle between the two of them is 30 days. A lot of studies show 30 days is the amount of time that it takes to build a habit or to get rid of a bad habit. Just working on one habit for 30 days is something that we need to be thinking about, not taking into consideration 2 or 3 habits at a time. Just work on one. Just work on one thing and work on that thing for just a month. And inshallah ta'ala will be improving in our lives. Number 3, realize that it's in us to change. Realize that it's in us to change. A lot of us say, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been struggling with this thing for 10 years, or it might not be to that extent, but we've been so connected to our phones, we've been so connected to all these things that we need to be working on, that it becomes ingrained in our DNA and it becomes ingrained in our mindset that I need to do this thing. Realize that it's in us to change. Meaning, Rasulullah ﷺ in the hadith, he said, the qalb, our heart is called qalb because of the word taqallub. Our heart is called qalb because of the word taqallub, meaning constantly turning and constantly changing. We need to realize that it's in us and it's in our hearts, it's the nature of our hearts to be constantly changing and be constantly turning and be constantly switching. So use that to our advantage. Don't look at it as, okay, I'm going to change for the worse. Rather, change for the better, and know that it's in our hearts to be changing for the better. Number 4, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who make mistakes. I see some ears, some people look up, and I'll explain this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who make mistakes. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in a hadith, if all of you were to stop sinning, if all of you were to all together just agree upon, we're not going to sin, we're not going to do any more sins, and we're just going to be good from now on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would wipe you off the earth and replace you with those who do make mistakes, with the caveat that they repent. With the caveat that they repent. Not that they just make mistakes and they live on, rather they repent and they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who make mistakes. Keep that in your mind. But what's the catch is that you repent and that you are remorseful and that you are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. So don't say, I'm doomed, I'm doing this bad habits, I'm doing this mistake, and I keep on making this mistake, even though I repented to Allah for it, and I go back to it. No, just keep it in your mindset that, again, it's in us to change, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who make mistakes, but then repent. But then ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. And I'm not just saying, after you do a sin, you say, astaghfirullah, and you just move on. Be really remorseful and be asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you change, and tell Him, I promise you not to go back to this sin. Even if you do, it's just having that mindset is helpful. Number 5, having that intention to change. Having the intention to change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or rather Rasulullah ﷺ, in a hadith that a lot of us know, he mentioned, it's the first hadith in Imam Nawawi's 40th hadith, he said, about Rasulullah ﷺ, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that all of our a'mal, all of our deeds are judged by our intentions. All of our deeds are judged by intentions. So even if you're working on this habit that you're trying to get rid of, and you're working on this good habit that you're trying to get into your life, even if you fail to get rid of it or to develop it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for the intention that you have made, if you have made that effort inside of the intention. Number 6, replace a bad habit with a good. Replace a bad habit with a good habit. So when we're talking about bad habits, we can also correlate it or put it together with sins or mistakes, in a sense, and in this step rather. Rasulullah ﷺ, when he was advising one of the Sahaba, he said, "Ittaqullah, have the taqwa of Allah, be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wherever you may be." And he said, after a bad deed, follow it up with a good deed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will wipe away that bad deed and reward you for it. So after a bad deed, follow it up with a good deed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for it. So in the same sense, when you're getting rid of a bad habit in your life, try to put a good habit in its place, and try to put a good habit to kind of replace that bad habit, and keep your mind occupied with that good habit. Number 7, change your environment. Change your environment. A lot of us may be saying, I've been trying to get rid of this bad habit for such a long time, but it's not happening. I've been trying for a month, I've been trying for the 30 days, and it's not happening. Then I asked them, why, who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are your friends, and who are the people you're hanging around with? And then that answers the question right there. If you're in an environment, if you're trying to stop drinking or you're trying to stop smoking, and you're in a bar for 30 days, then how is that bad habit going to get out of your life? If you're trying to stop listening to music wherever, and you're going to concerts, then that's the same mindset, right? So change your environment. Rasulullah said, in a hadith in Bukhari, he said, a good friend and a bad friend is like a perfume seller and a blacksmith. A good friend and a bad friend is like a perfume seller and a blacksmith. The good friend is the perfume seller, the blacksmith is the bad friend. And he said, if you hang around the perfume seller, if you're around him, you can buy some perfume from him, you can buy some raita from him, you can at the very least, your clothes will be perfumed by just the environment that you're in. If you're hanging around the blacksmith, your lungs will become charred, your clothes will become black, and your face will become dirty. All these things come into consideration. So he said, don't hang around. In a sense, don't hang around that blacksmith. Don't hang around the blacksmith, that bad friend, that person who's going to be constantly putting you in a bad environment, in a bad state. Rather hang around that good friend. Number 8, we'll inshallah wrap up really quickly. Tell someone about your effort to develop this good habit or get rid of this bad habit. Telling someone helps a lot. It may be your best friend, it may be your wife, or even your parents. Telling someone that you're trying to get rid of this bad habit helps them, kind of follow up with you, making sure that you're doing the steps needed to be, getting rid of this bad thing. Number 9, remind yourself of death often. Remind yourself of death often. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, remember often the destroyer of pleasures. Remember often the destroyer of pleasures, which is death, in the hadith in Bukhari. And last but not least, this is a step that we should be taking before every single step in our lives, and that's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His help. Asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His help in whatever we do, whatever bad habit we're trying to get rid of our life, whatever good habit we're trying to develop into our life. Asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help always in every single aspect is something that we can't go wrong with. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us keep improving. To help us keep improving and to help us get rid of these bad habits that we've been trying so hard since maybe Ramadan, since even before then, we've been trying so hard to get rid of those things. Ask Him to help us get rid of those things in our lives, help us put that effort in to get those bad things out of our lives, and to help them replace them with good habits that will only get us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in the end, Him be pleased with us. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى كل ملائكة المقربين وعلى عبادك الصالحين اللهم أيد الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وجعلنا آمين واختم من قصد دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا آمين عباد الله رحمني ورحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله تعالى على عز وجل وأتم وأهم وأكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. أقيم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله